Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Minister, for returning to this committee. You know, your opening it's beyond rich. I'm going to read some facts to you about your government, Minister, that I'm sure you're very well aware of. CEBA reported yesterday $3.5 billion in funds that were awarded to those who should not have received them. We've had the Arrive scam scandal, $9 million NYC condo, and this is the most expensive government in the history of Canada. And you're coming here and accusing us of playing political games at a time when your government has been completely irresponsible. And as I've said repeatedly in this committee, you are the one, Minister, who holds the purse strings. I'm actually shocked the Prime Minister gave you another job, considering the responsibility that you hold as president of the Treasury Board. Your effort should be entirely focused here as president of the Treasury Board on reducing the deficit. Because I will also remind you that from April to September of this year, the deficit is already $8.2 billion higher than it was the year before. The PBO that we have coming in the following hour said that you will miss the deficit target by $6.8 billion. So that's my first question to you. Is this number even accurate, $6.8 billion? Tell us today, Minister, how bad is the number? Tell Canadians.
Well, what I will tell Canadians is that unlike the Conservatives who vote against supports for Canadians at every step, whether it is the National School Food Program, whether it is the dental care program, whether it is the Canadian Armed Forces, whether it is affordable housing or Jordan's Principle, the Conservatives vote against Canadians every single time. So I find it strange that you can say you actually do support Canadians and you do care about Canadians when you vote against Canadians at every turn. So the question,
okay, so like
really
the Prime Minister, it's
very
clear
concerning for
you don't
all
know the
members
number.
of the
The
House.
Prime Minister showed Pierre Poilievre he didn't know the number last week, and like the Prime Minister, you don't know the number. Then tell me the number. Tell me the number.
I know the numbers. And
tell me the number. What's the deficit going to be this year?
Engaged.
Tell the number to Canadians, please.
We are definitely engaged with all the departments in the government, including the Department of Finance, that holds the purse strings in terms of our budgetary commitments, and we will be ensuring that the public accounts are delivered by the end of the year where all of the numbers will be contained.
Minister, now you come in here and you talk about all of these programs and how you are taking care of Canadians. Yeah, you can't even take care of the public service, and it's evident now. As it was quoted in Options this week, if you lay out the puzzle pieces as we head into the fiscal update, it becomes clear that there is no path forward for this government that doesn't go through the public service. You can even keep your promise to them to take care of them, to hold their jobs. Why should Canadians believe that you can take responsibility for them when you can't even take responsibility for the public service?
Again,
so you have stated now that you are going to look beyond attrition to cuts in the public service. We know from your track record, we know from our work on McKinsey, we know from the Accenture information released yesterday with the Auditor General that you won't do it alone. So can you share with Canadians, please, who have you hired to help you complete the layoffs in the public service?
Again, more inaccurate statements from my honourable colleague. I would first of all like to thank the public servants for their incredibly hard work. I would also like to say that our government will not be adopting DRAP-style measures like previous Conservative governments have done. We are continuing services
So what are you going to do to save the money then, Minister? You have this deficit. You haven't met your deficits in recent years. The PBO says that you are overshooting the number that you gave already. You haven't been able to give a number here today.
We will continue
what are you going to do?
Be here for
when you arrived
service.
in this position, not this past summer, but the summer before, you were so enthusiastic, so peachy keen about all the savings that you were going to find, and you haven't found these savings, Minister.
Again,
in fact, your financial position is worse. So tell Canadians today, what do you plan to do? You've let down the public service,
Mr.
or are you going to let down the Canadians as well?
Those statements are inaccurate. We have actually saved on professional services approximately $800 million, and we have instituted a number of reforms to ensure that there is more discipline in the system relating to contracting with third parties. I announced those last March. They include an updated manager's guide. They include a revised directive on the conflict of interest. They include a horizontal audit, and they include the development of a risk and compliance process. So all of those measures, in addition to reducing the government's reliance on third-party contractors, must be taken into account, and they certainly weren't reflected in the honourable members' questions.
Yeah, but was reflected was the continued debt, the continued deficit, you letting down Canadians, and which increases their taxes. You're talking about all these programs. You don't seem to understand that these programs cost money, that they add, in fact, to the burden of Canadians, because you are not keeping your promise to the public service or to Canadians, as is evidenced by the continued deficits, including the one this year, and you can't even tell me what it is.
Perhaps
Thank you
the
very much,
member
Mr.
can
Chair.
explain why she's going to vote against 400,000 children and voting against the National School Food Program.
I have the floor.
That's the question.
I have the floor here, Minister. We said we'd stick to specific times. Mrs. Cusi, please, for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, Minister, as was reported in the Ottawa Citizen yesterday, you have begun a multi-billion-dollar spending review. So can you please share with the committee what is the name of the third-party organization, the consulting firm, that is helping you with this multi-billion-dollar spending review?
I have no knowledge of any third-party contractor that is assisting with this process, but I will turn to the officials in case they have knowledge.
You should have
on
knowledge
this.
of everything, first of all. I'll start by saying that. But Mr. Matthews, briefly,
Just
please.
to add, from a TBS perspective, where we are, organizing and running the RGS2 initiative through the expenditure management sector, there's no contractors or companies been hired. What we cannot say is, has any department specifically hired a consulting resource to help them develop their own proposals? We would not have line of sight into that.
But again, as the Treasury Board, the overseer of all the departments regarding finances, I would expect there to be knowledge of that. So, Minister, if I were to do an OPQ, there would be nothing that would come up on a third party relative to this process outside of what Mr. Matthews has said.
Mr. Matthews' comments are ones that I support.
Okay. And if I were to do an ATIP, I wouldn't find any information currently on a third-party consulting firm.
You're welcome to file any type of report that you want, whether it's an OPQ or an ATIP. I'm telling you what I know,
Okay.
in honesty.
I appreciate that. So you are telling me then that the Trudeau government is doing this all on its own right now. It's being completely handled by your Prime Minister and yourself as Minister of the Treasury Board.
I am telling you that the process that we are following is that I have sent a letter to each minister to provide me with details regarding how they're going to meet the targets relating to refocused government spending, including reducing the size of the public service by 5,000 through natural attrition. We are receiving those submissions now. We will review them, and we will table results in the main estimates if all goes well.
Okay, thank you. So that from a government whereby the PBO says that you are $6.8 billion over your deficit, and as far as you know, the Trudeau government under your leadership, under the Prime Minister, is managing all of this. God help us all. Minister, I will go on to my next subject now, which is something that has been very dear to this committee, and that is the Arrive scandal. You promised this committee several months ago, possibly a year ago now, that you would recoup the $64 million from the fraudsters and the scamsters that took money out of the pockets of Canadians. You told this committee, you told Canadians that you would recoup this money. This, of course, is a scandal that is under RCMP investigation and is house ordered for review to return the money. So my question for you today on behalf of Canadians is, How much money of the $64 million have you recovered, Minister?
The RCMP investigation is continuing, and I said when we receive the report of the RCMP, we will recoup lost monies of Canadian taxpayers.
Okay, that sounds like a zero. But I'm sure you have a process in place that you have started. What type of confirmations have you received when this process is completed of funds that you will recoup, where certain vendors perhaps have said, as soon as this process is completed, we will hand over these funds, we will return these funds? What commitments have you received in terms of funds expected to be returned back to you? What commitments have you received? A number, please.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, the RCMP investigation is ongoing. We have a commitment to recoup taxpayer dollars at every turn. We have accepted the recommendations of the Auditor General relating to those issues, and we will continue to ensure that we adhere to the recommendations. That's why I implemented reforms in March 2024, revised directive on conflict of interest,
we're past
increased
our time.
contract
Where's the money?
information,
Where's the money,
horizontal
Minister?
audit.
Please
You're
get
gonna go
Canadians
to,
the
As soon
money.
as we
Thank
have a
you.
report
I'm
from the
sorry, we are past our
RCMP,
time,
we will
both
move
of
on.
you. We're going
Mrs.
to
McNulty,
Mrs. please, for 6.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Anand, Mr. Matthews, and Ms. Cahill and Mr. Brunel-Côté. I want to start with a subcontractor, international subcontractors problems that we saw in some cases. I get dozens of emails regarding MSH, how people are having trouble getting their money back. Even within my office, I have an employee who had to take various steps for 3 months. It took her 3 months to get her money back. You know, we think that actually some people at the same time, some companies are having to look at perhaps downsizing because they don't even have enough demand. So what's the difference between what I hear, what I'm seeing, and what Canal de Vie is giving you as an answer? First, thank you for the question. The decision to subcontract to MSH was a decision by Canada V, but we have seen problems with the subcontractor. For example, waiting times for calls in November 2024 at MSH were less than 4 minutes. And also, in terms of the processing of requests for reimbursements, was 4 days for complete coverage and 8 days for emergency trips. We do have a lot of work to do in future, but we have seen progress made with this subcontractor, MSH. Would it be appropriate to send you the emails with all due respect so that you could get a different perspective on the situation at Canada Life?
Bien sûr, comme j'ai dit.
Of course, as I said, we have and they have more work to do. But we have seen the progress that was made, as I mentioned. If you'd like to forward the emails to me, of course you can do so. Now, of the $1.7 billion that the Treasury Board Secretariat is asking for, $24 million would be for professional services and special services. What are these professional and special services, and what are the objectives of these services?
Oui, merci.
Thank you. I mentioned a few services in my remarks, but I can provide you with some specific details also. For example, $600 million would be for national defense, chiefly for engineering and scientific services. also research. Oh, excuse me, Ms. Anand. I'm looking particularly at the $24 million that would be provided for the Treasury Board Secretariat's services.
Oui.
Yes. Of course, we will deliver once we get approval in the House the money for HR systems. We need to support services for our public servants so that they are able to obtain their pay. So if I understand correctly, this $24 million in professional services would be to support HR?
Monsieur le Président, si
Mr. Chair, if I may, it's a contract to replace the Phoenix pay system. As you know, there was a project launched over a year ago requiring professionals from other businesses to ensure that there's enough expertise provided within the department to make progress in terms of the system. Would you have anything to add? That's it? All right.
OK. Donc,
All right. So $18 million under 1B, vote 1B for HR and pay the next generation and so on. And another $24 million to support all of that, if I understood correctly.
En fait,
In fact, that amount is included in the $18 million. Now, the Secretariat, as the Secretariat and the President have indicated, there are other professional services that are required in terms of the online access to information service. Those are slightly more minor professional services, I would say, but they're required for cybersecurity also. Thank you very much. Now, very quickly, in terms of the 2023-2024 departmental results, reports, they have not yet been tabled. When will they be tabled?
Premièrement, nous
First, we will deliver the public accounts to the House before the end of the year, and after that, we will table those reports also.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Vignola, please go ahead.
merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Anand, I want to come back to your last answer regarding the ministerial results, departmental results rather, and public accounts. You were saying that these reports are tabled at the end of the year. I guess that's December 31. That means 9 months after the end of the fiscal year. That's point one. Point two, the accounts and the results are only tabled when the House sitting, and once the House has been sitting for 15 days. But we're not sitting on December 31st. Am I to understand that we will receive these reports sometime in January or February, nearly 1 year after the end of the previous fiscal year? And how open is the government to changing that timeline so that parliamentarians from all parties can do their jobs and review these numbers?
comme j'ai dit,
As I said earlier, we will be following legislation and legislative requirements. We have already discussed these numbers and these reports with the Finance Department. The department has those numbers, and we delivered those documents to the Auditor General once she has conducted her audits. We will sign them. Mr. Chair, if I may, 2 quick points. I know that everybody really wants to obtain those reports. One of the members of the committee also
Current updates on government spending and financial results. I would add GC Infobase, which is a tool that's transparent and available online that will provide members information throughout the year and if on departmental spending and performance if they're interested.
Merci beaucoup. Très, très, très.
Thank you very much. Very, very quickly. In the past, training for pilots was done internally at the Royal Canadian Air Force, and now it's going to be Skyline Canada Limited Partnership. Why train pilots externally and, pay $159 million more for that?
Joyce, there's no time left for an answer. Perhaps you can provide the committee with a written response.